On the 30th of March 2013, a group of young high school students released their first low-budget independent fan film set in the world of their favourite show, Doctor Who. Doctor Who, the 12th era, as it was known then, debuted with the first episode of the first series, Fear the Dark, Fear the Light. Over the past 10 years, these high school students grew into adults and formed their own production company called DC63 Productions. This is the story of how DC63 Productions began from humble beginnings to an ambitious presence on YouTube. Every story has a beginning, and for DC63 Productions, that beginning was actually December 2010. Chris Jones, head writer and the current star of the DC63 Doctor Who fan film series, gathered his friends on his birthday to present the idea of making their own fan film in the Doctor Who universe. The ideas were ambitious, and that very night they began. Chris has been a fan of Doctor Who most of his life, watching reruns of the classic era on UK TV Gold, before hearing news of a modern revival coming in 2005. When the show hit our screens in 2005, Chris would run around the back garden in a black coat pretending to be the Doctor in his own adventures. The thought of making his own fan film series was one that had stayed with him for the best part of 6 years, until he finally decided to go for it and make his dream a reality. The fan film series, in its early stages, shot some scenes over the course of 2011, but none of this ever saw the light of day, and very little footage remained. The early days of DC63 Productions were very much trial and error. So me and my friends at the time, we would get together, we'd shoot a scene for an episode, and that would sort of be it. None of these episodes were ever completed. None of it ever really went anywhere. We do have some surviving footage that if I can find it will definitely be in this documentary. But most of that footage is just lost to time. It is very much an era that we have firmly moved away from. But it's good to be able to reflect and go back to those early days, back to the sort of time where we knew nothing about filmmaking, we knew nothing about how any of it worked, and it was just that real full-on trial and error. And we shot scenes in some of our houses, we shot scenes at Kenny's dad's business, and we shot a fair bit, but just none of it was really usable, I guess is the best way to describe it, because we never had a complete story. It was a lot of just random chunks of bits, and at the time we were trying to go for I think a 12 or 13 episode series, which if you've ever tried to make a fan film series, 12 to 13 episodes is a massive undertaking. I do not recommend going for that higher count of episodes. I think 6 to 8 is kind of the doable format, I would say. And if you want to go for more of an easier route, then I would say 4 episodes, because the big thing is quality over quantity. You want to make sure that what you're putting out is good and not, just whatever you've come up with. And that is something that we've learned a lot throughout time, and you'll see that in this documentary that, we've gone through a lot of trial and error. We've gone through a lot of, that's not very good, how can we do that better in the future kind of moments. And yeah, I think where we're at now is kind of where we want to be, where we're actually starting to invest in the show, which was something that we couldn't really do in the early days because we were all kids and none of us had jobs, so where would the money come from? So that is kind of the early days of DC63.
So this whole thing originally started out back in high school where Chris pitched... So this whole thing started out back in high school with Chris pitching the idea to me and a few other people that we knew at the time, the idea of doing our own episodes of Doctor Who, filming it all in our spare time and uploading it to YouTube. And yeah, that's basically what we've been doing ever since. I mean, our original episode never finished at all, and we did do a couple of first attempts, a few pilot episodes if you will, but ultimately those never happened. At least those never went anywhere. Some of those never happened. Some of those did go to YouTube, but on a channel that's no longer there.
The project seemed all but dead in 2011, and as time went on, it seemed as though hope was lost. Chris was determined to get his Doctor Who fan film off the ground, and his close childhood friend Kenny, also an avid fan of Doctor Who, was committed to helping Chris achieve his goal. By July 2012, the pair had finished their final GCSE exams and decided that during the summer they would shoot all 8 episodes of Series 1. With the help of their other school friend at the time, Matt Honor, the trio got to work on Series 1. Filmed with a total budget of £0 and using the only equipment available such as toys and Chris and Kenny's camcorders, Series 1 was wrapped in a week.
Then after multiple attempts we managed to figure things out until we got to Fear the Dark, Fear the Light, which is something that me, Chris and a mate of ours called Matt, who was in the episode, we filmed it over my house over a couple of days and a night over at my place. And yeah, that's the episode that we managed to complete and got the things rolling from there.
Shooting Series 1, that was an interesting time. This was back when we were going to call the show Doctor Who the 12th Era, and it was going to be set around a version of the 12th Doctor, but we sort of soon very quickly abandoned that when we got a 12th Doctor in the actual show. We kind of thought it would be a bit weird having a fan series based on a 12th incarnation with a 12th incarnation currently on screen, so we were very quick to abandon that approach. But it all started with episode 1. Actually, we shot episode 1 over the course of a night and a morning. So we used to do this a lot in the early days. We loved shooting at night. There was something about shooting at night time, and we would actually set aside days where we'd all sleep round Kenny's and shoot at night time. It was usually always just me, Kenny and Matt, and there are a few episodes like that. I know there's definitely one in Series 2. But that was the first episode we shot, and we actually then shot the entire series in chronological order. So we shot 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in that order. The hardest one kind of being the 4-part finale. But because we were sort of young and, a lot of this was just coming from pure imagination, and we didn't have much in the way of written scripts. A lot of it was, I'd written some basic outline of a plot, and we did a lot of improvisation, which was fun because we were all drama students as well. Like, we all studied drama at GCSE, so it was fun to, kind of push ourselves in that regard. But yeah, it all started with that night shoot, and that night shoot was a funny one, because we shot in what has now become the infamous alleyway, which I'm pretty sure I'll show you what that looks like in this documentary. And that alleyway's come up a lot in the series, and it's definitely not going anywhere anytime soon. But that alleyway is actually literally just across the road from Kenny's house, so it's actually a really quick and convenient place to shoot. It's funny now thinking about it. I'm actually probably a little bit more worried to shoot at night now than I was back then. Back then we were very carefree, and we were like, it's fine. No, like there's no one that's gonna come up to us or anything. You know, it's nighttime. Whereas now I'd be a little bit more cautious because you don't know who you're gonna come across at night. So yes, it was an interesting time where we kind of, you know, we weren't really worried about anything, and we just wanted to make a series, and we knew that if we were to make at least this one series, then we will have fulfilled that kind of goal that we had, which was to make a Doctor Who fan series. We didn't really think that it was going to propel the way that it did, but you know, it's sort of grown and gotten bigger over time, and we've had new casts come and go. We've had new people, you know, writing come and go, and that's still very much a thing. Like where we're at now, the current team is not the team that we had 10 years ago. It's only really me and Kenny that are those original two that have stayed in that team. But I suppose the big thing really that was kind of exciting with regards to Series 1 was we were able to actually take Kenny's shed in his garden and transform that into the TARDIS console room, which was great because I remember pre-Series 1 when some of the footage we shot, we used to use a pool table in Kenny's garage that we would then just throw random bits on top of. I think there was like a Power Rangers gun that had a moving handle. That was the flight lever. And it was, you know, it was a strange concoction of just, that's quite clearly a pool table. And with the shed, we actually had these two big bits of wood that we, you know, were able to put together and actually put like keyboards and stuff on it and actually make it look like a TARDIS. And a lot of that stuff came from Kenny's dad, because Kenny's dad works a lot in kind of, you know, go-karts and cars and all this sort of stuff. So we used to get, you know, just random bits from cars and stuff that like looked really cool and had like twisty bits on. So, you know, we threw a lot of that into the console, and as you'll see, you know, with the fan series, like the console has changed over time, but it was really exciting actually to build that original thing. And something that hasn't changed is the paint on the walls. We actually painted the walls with kind of yellow circles to kind of replicates kind of classic era style roundels. That is something that we are looking to change in the future, but it's interesting how we painted those walls 10 years ago, well, more than 10 years ago, it'd be about 11 years ago, and we've not done anything to the walls since. We've added lights, we had the TARDIS phone, you know, we've added bits like actually physically onto the TARDIS, but we've never changed the colour of those walls. So I think that's something that's quite interesting. And the floor as well used to just be wood, and then we got a carpet, which is quite nice because it means like when we do stuff where I'm on the ground of the console, you know, I'm not actually laying on just wood, I can lay on carpet. So that was probably like the thing that made it feel most real, like we were actually doing it, was the idea that we had this TARDIS. And we even had for a while the door of the shed was a TARDIS door on the front, because that came from a tent that Kenny had a while ago. Well, I say it was a tent, it was just like a pop-up tent material TARDIS. I don't think you could use it as a tent, it was very small on the inside. But yeah, that sort of fell apart because it was just left outside, and if you know British weather, like leave something like that out and it's just eventually gonna, you know, disintegrate. So we actually cut that door off and stuck it on the shed door. So yeah, so that was, you know, that was the exciting part of Series 1.
To maintain momentum, Chris and Kenny decided that they would shoot each series during the 6-week school summer holiday, allowing them time to edit each episode for a weekly release the following year. This would become the standard format from 2012 to 2015, covering 3 full series of 8 episodes and 4 specials, 3 festive specials and 1 special for the 50th anniversary of the show. Chris and Kenny felt excited to finally have a series that is shot and released in a regular pattern. The first full series was capped off by 2 specials, the first of which being a feature-length episode for the 50th anniversary of the show, simply titled The Darkness. At this point, Chris had started to plan an era-long arc that would result in many revelations in the future. The Darkness was shot in April 2013 and was the first episode to have its shoot spread out over several days, rather than 1 episode per day, which was how Series 1 was shot. The Darkness not only celebrated the show's 50th anniversary, but it also celebrated Chris and Kenny's progress of making the fan film dream come true. 1 month after the release of The Darkness, Christmas 2013, the first attempt at a Dalek story was released, titled Restoration of the Daleks, and was heavily inspired by the 2005 story Dalek, as well as the Dalek stories of the past, such as the 5th Doctor classic Resurrection of the Daleks and the 6th Doctor classic Revelation of the Daleks. Shot in July, this was the team's first attempt at shooting a festive special in the middle of summer. I remember starting to film The Darkness, which was our 50th anniversary special, and it was funny because we were actually shooting in, I believe it was April 2013, which at the time they were shooting the actual 50th anniversary special, Day of the Doctor, because I remember seeing photos of David Tennant in costume and Matt Smith in costume, and it was just funny how it all sort of lined up where we were filming our 50th anniversary special at the same time that the actual show was filming its 50th anniversary special. But this was the first time that I'd really started to think about what I would want to do long term. What is the long term story arc for our fan series? And that's where the character of the Darkness comes in, who was played wonderfully by Kenny. And we also had the character of Blake, a really quite crucial character to that story. And it was a lot of fun to shoot that episode. I got to wear a very Matt Smith-esque costume. And, you know, we had the Master in it. There was, you know, some action. There was some, you know, great TARDIS moments. Great final confrontation with the Darkness at the end. And that episode was just a lot of fun to shoot. And then we moved on to something that was quite simple, actually. Restoration of the Daleks was quite a simple story. It was just me and Kenny. We had a puppet that Kenny made for the Dalek mutants. That was like a really big thing for us. We were quite excited about the idea of featuring a Dalek mutant. And I was really excited to feature the Daleks. I always feel like the Doctor never becomes the Doctor until they face the Daleks. So for me, that was quite a big moment for me to go, this is it, this is going to be my first Dalek story, and why not at Christmas, eh? So those were 2 really exciting and really fun episodes to shoot. I will say this, shooting in the summer in any form of, you know, heavy costume, brutal. A lot of my Doctor costumes always feature some sort of coat, and I was wearing I was wearing a winter coat because it was, you know, it was a winter episode, so that was a bit brutal in the middle of July, but nowhere near as brutal as my costume that I, you know, wear for Series 4, Series 5 later on. That costume in the sun is absolutely insane to wear. So just a little tip, try to make a costume that fits all seasons. It's quite tricky, but there you go. So yeah, those episodes were really fun to shoot. I have really fond memories of, you know, filming those 2 episodes and editing them as well, and spending so much time with those 2 specials. Moving forward, Series 2 began filming shortly after Restoration of the Daleks and featured new cast members,
Lauren Smith was the main addition, playing the first companion to Chris's Doctor, Jessica. Shot between July and October of 2013, Series 2 consisted of another 8 episodes, with production starting to see some improvements. At the time, Chris was studying media, and his skills as a filmmaker were improving. Series 2 saw more use of visual effects to add a bit more professionalism to the overall look of the show. At this point, the 12th era title had been dropped, and it was simply known as Doctor Who Fan Film Series. The finale of Series 2 saw the departure of Lauren Smith as Jessica, making way for new companions in the future.
Much like with the specials, I have a lot of fond memories of shooting Series 2 as well. This was where I felt like I was really coming into my own playing the Doctor, and I was really coming into my own as a filmmaker as well. I was really starting to understand the process of it all. There was more cast members. Lauren, Charlotte, Rory. Those were 3 really big players in that series. Obviously, Matt came back. We did another night episode using a title that I believe was the original title of an actual Doctor Who episode that I just loved. It was a title called Hider in the House, and I believe the episode Hide in Series 11 was originally called Hider in the House, and I heard that somewhere, and I was just like, ooh, Hider in the House, I like that title, so I'm going to take that title. I used that title. I really like that night episode as well. We also used a title that I had no idea would become a big Disney song in the future, but the Series 2 finale, the first part of it, is called Into the Unknown, and as you know, that is the big song of Frozen 2. I kind of wish I could see into the future and have not used that title, but it was all because we had a new Time Lord character that we'd introduced in Series 1 called The Unknown, and he very much played a big part of the Series 2 finale as well. So that's where that title came from. But I have a lot of fond memories of shooting Series 2. We had the Cybermen, we had obviously The Unknown, we had that night shoot episode. Kenny wrote a few really good episodes actually in that series as well, and that was just a lot of fun to make. And again, we'd gotten better at it. We didn't shoot an entire series in a week. We actually spread the shoot out, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun to make that series.
The Madman and Alice was set to be the festive special for 2014, taking a Doctor Who spin on Alice in Wonderland. This special featured a brand new guest star, Lainey Cullop, Chris's girlfriend at the time. This was also the first instance of the Doctor having some sort of romantic connection to a companion within the series. Shot in December of 2013, this allowed the team to utilise Christmas decorations that were already put up around the house. Series 2 was released in August of 2014, with The Madman and Alice releasing in December of 2014. This would also mark the end of an era, as with Series 3, things would start to change. Production on Series 3 began in the summer of 2014, and would introduce 2 new companions, Simon Jones, played by Kenny in his first series regular role, and Sky James, played by Phoebe Spragg, who at the time was Chris's girlfriend. Series 3 would tell a tale of love and loss, which is very much a reflection of what was happening to Chris in his personal life. In the summer of 2014, Chris and Kenny had already started work on Series 3 when Chris met Phoebe. Initially, Phoebe was not interested in being in the series. However, seeing how much it meant to Chris, she decided to join, and Sky was introduced halfway through the series. Having shot the first 5 episodes, everything was on track. That was until Chris's nan sadly passed away. Chris took some time off, and Series 3 was ultimately split into two halves, with Part 1 releasing in April 2015 and Part 2 releasing in September 2015.
Hello YouTube and welcome to Dr. Chris 63's channel. Obviously I'm not Chris, as you can tell. My name is Phoebe and I'm an executive producer for Doctor Who. I've been working with Chris for quite a while on his series. I've been dating Chris for 10 months and I am Sky James. She's going to be the character that is soon introduced in Series 3. So you will see me in further episodes. Now, this series is literally amazing at the moment. I've kind of seen some of Chris's editing, but Chris can't actually make this video at the moment because he's so busy. Like, this series is really going out with a bang. Every episode he is making count, and literally it is looking so good. I've seen like snippets and stuff like that. It is looking really, really, really good. But obviously, greatness takes time. So we actually are going to have to postpone this episode and kind of take a little bit of a break. This week's going to have to be a break because there's just so much editing that goes into this. Like, people that edit videos will know, fellow YouTubers, editing takes a lot of time. And we are making this the best series we can. So it's going to be pushed back by a week. But, you know, Chris has been working so hard. And I'm sorry, but my laptop nearly fell over. Chris has been working really, really hard to produce Doctor Who. And, you know, he wanted to get Series 3 out with 4 episodes and then a break and then another 4 episodes. But obviously this week's just going to have to, you know, we're just going to have to push it back. But honestly, it's worth the wait.
The addition of new cast members started to make the shooting process long and tedious for Chris. There was a lot of joking around to the point where it would take a long time to shoot one scene. This frustrated Chris and started to put a strain on his and Phoebe's relationship.
So Series 3 was quite an exciting time because we'd gotten 2 series under our belts. We'd done 2 Christmas specials and we'd done a 50th anniversary special. So we were starting to really get a handle on how it was all going to work. We finally gave Kenny a series regular role as a companion. He was playing Simon Jones, and then obviously we had Phoebe Spragg come into it as Sky James later on. Series 3 as well was all about love and loss, and that was a big theme for the series. It was a lot of you know, the Doctor going through a lot of pain, and we wanted to really encapsulate that and really get to a point with the unknown in the series finale where he was starting to feel like this big looming threat that was always coming back to get the Doctor. So it was a really exciting time. It was also a really sad time because my nan passed away during the production of Series 3, and that was really tough for me because the whole reason I wanted to get into filmmaking in the first place was an escapism aspect. It's this idea of being able to escape reality, and that stemmed from when my granddad passed away. So, you know, then having my nan pass away, it just sort of really hit quite heavy because, you know, part of why I was making this in the first place was to escape from those kind of real world things. And then, you know, something like that happens and it really just knocks you back because you live in this fake kind of reality to a point where you don't really fully realize something that happens for real until it happens. And yeah, that was tough because she'd been ill for a while, and you know, I was using the fan series as a way of kind of escaping all of that. So obviously I took some time off, and this was the first series that we did that was split in 2 halves. That was just because it wasn't finished. It wasn't finished editing. The editing wasn't finished, and the filming wasn't finished either. I remember we actually, with Series 3 Part 1, I'd finished the first 3 episodes when my nan had passed away. So the first 3 episodes were completely locked in, done, dusted, and it was actually episode 4 and 5 that needed editing. But obviously, you know, I wanted a bit of time to kind of grieve and, you know, come away from it all. So I actually, you know, used some of that grieving process actually to edit 4 and 5, and ended up dedicating episode 5 to my nan, because I felt like, you know, it was important too. She was a big part of my life, and that was a really special thing for me to be able to do. And then obviously, you know, moving forward from that, we got series 3 part 2, and there was a lot of big things that happened with that, especially with the unknown and with the death of Simon, and then kind of looking forward to what was going to happen next. And we did have this idea of doing these 5 specials, and that was going to end my Doctor's era. I didn't actually know what was going to happen beyond that yet, but we were pretty set in stone that that's what was going to happen.
Series 3 wrapped in the summer of 2015, and with the finale, A Fate Worse Than Death, Chris had planted the seed for the finale of the era. The original plan was to conclude Chris's era with 5 special episodes, starting with the 2015 Christmas special, Silent Nights. This would be the penultimate episode that Chris and Phoebe would shoot together, and once again was a Christmas special that was shot at Christmas time, with a very quick post-production turnaround. The second special was set to air on New Year's Day, but tragedy struck when Chris's laptop spontaneously died, meaning that the dark side of the moon would never see the light of day. All that remained was a rough cut of the episode.
So shooting the specials after series 3, this is kind of where everything just went to hell. It all just fell apart from here. This was like the darkest time of making this series. So we shot the Christmas special, Silent Night. That was a relatively easy shoot. You know, it only really required me, Kenny, Phoebe, and it didn't take us long. It took us about 3 days, I think, to shoot the whole thing. And we got that made, we got that out. The New Year's Day special that, you know, is now lost to time, I suppose. I do actually have a rough cut of it, and you'll see some of that footage in this documentary. Whether or not we'll ever release that lost episode is that's up in the air. But that took a little bit longer because there was some location shooting. We had some extra cast members in that one as well. But basically, it was the day before New Year's Eve. And I remember this vividly because about a month or 2 prior, me and Phoebe had split up, and I was actually in a relationship with someone else around New Year's Eve of that year. And so I was determined to get it finished the day before New Year's Eve, because I was going to a New Year's Eve party with my then new girlfriend. And it was like really exciting. So I was up to the early hours of the morning when all of a sudden my laptop just completely, the screen just went black. And I was like, what's happened? And I was trying to power it on, nothing. And then it wasn't until I gave it to my dad the next day, and he took it to work, and someone at his work who was a little bit more knowledgeable in computers was like, yeah, basically the battery and the motherboard had completely burnt out, and the cost of repairing it is about the same cost as, you know, a lower priced laptop, like a £300 laptop. So because I already had a MacBook at the time, we just kind of went, well, there's no point in paying to get this fixed. I might as well just use my MacBook. So I had the whole process of switching everything over to Mac, but I basically, at that point, I was done. I just sort of went, I can't deal with this now. I'm just gonna let this one go, and we'll, you know, maybe do something down the road. We had actually also shot some scenes for future episodes, In fact, the last two specials were going to be a two-parter, and they were going to be called The Hard Time. So that title of our upcoming film, that's been around for a while. And yeah, we had this whole plan. We'd shot some stuff for it. Again, we have some of this footage. You'll see some of this footage in documentary. But I was just done. And, you know, editing stuff that features your ex-girlfriend is hard, especially when, you know, there was a lot of feelings there. So it was a really, really hard time to sort of go through, and I just decided to basically give up. And, you know, it took me about 2 years to sort of get over it all, and, you know, bring it back, because I did ultimately feel like I owed it to myself and I owed it to the team to, you know, give it some kind of conclusion. So yeah, so that is the story behind the Lost specials. It was the darkest time for the fan series, and it was the darkest time for the channel and for the production team as well. So yeah, so it's tough to kind of look back on, but I always think it's important to look back on it, because, you know, despite all of that, we overcame it, and, you know, we're still going. So it is quite an impressive feat to kind of overcome such turmoil in everything. And yeah, and then, you know, moved on to series 4. So
Winter of 2015 also saw Chris and Phoebe split up. Between losing his nan and now his girlfriend, Chris soon gave up on the dream, and the laptop battery burning out was the final straw. Chris let the series die with Silent Night. Over the next 2 years, Chris would write original projects and would continue to watch Doctor Who. In 2017, Chris decided that he owed it to himself and to the team to finish the series. Series 4 was written in mid-2017, and production began late 2017 and continued until summer 2018. Marina Joy Phillips joined the cast as Daisy Rivers and breathed new life that the series desperately needed. Series 4 gave Chris the perfect opportunity to start again and change the 5 specials ending into a Series 4 ending. The initial plan was to release Series 4 Part 1 in 2018 and Part 2 in 2019. However, with a focus on quality, Part 2 started to take longer than expected. 2019 came and went, and they were no closer to completion. Then, of course, 2020 brought the world to a standstill.
filming series 4 was actually quite a fun experience. It allowed me to do a few things that are sort of things that I've always wanted to do. Number one, upgrade my camera and start shooting in high definition. Also, do more directing. So the first episode, there's not a ton of Doctor, it's more companion focused, and that allowed me to be behind the camera more, which is something that I've been wanting to do for ages, and that's why I'm sort of moving in that direction. So that was really fun, really exciting. It also allowed us to work with a bit of stop motion, also allowed us to get creative with a horror themed episode where you never see the monster, and we used a lot of creative kind of camera movements and angles for that. Also got to use the oxygen farm idea from series 5. So there was a lot of really fun and exciting things that we did. We did a New Year's Day special, so we kind of took that idea that we were going to have with the previous New Year's Day special, and we eventually made a New Year's Day special, and that was really fun as well. Got to do a kind of like dreamy sci-fi thing with that, but that was never intended to be the end of series 4. So series 4 to me has always felt a little strange, and that is purely because we spent a long time with what was part 2, because there was a big story arc in that, and it was also bringing back one of my favourite monsters, one that we've wanted to do for the show for ages, which is the Sea Devils. And because of that, Series 5 started taking a lot of time. So when we eventually ended up in lockdown, it allowed me to actually get a lot more creative with it. I changed some aspects of the scripts. I acquired new equipment as well. So that was a really fun and then also strange time, because there was a lot of planning when we couldn't do anything. So that was Series 4 really in a nutshell.
Over the course of the lockdown, Chris decided that the best course of action would be for Series 4 Part 2 to become Series 5. Ultimately, Series 5 was finished and released in 2021, and the team were finally in a position to complete Chris's era as the Doctor. Series 4 and 5 saw a drastic improvement in camera quality, visual effects quality, and overall filmmaking quality.
So, Series 5 went through probably the biggest change, because it was never supposed to be its own series. It was always Series 4 Part 2. And because of lockdown, we had to make a lot of really big changes. Like, for example, the Sea Devil episode, we had to cut quite a lot of the location shooting. There was going to be tons and tons of location shooting. And we just couldn't make it work in the time frame that we had. We just had to cut some characters because, again, time frame, logistics. But it enabled us to kind of really work on what we can do in the confines of a small budget and being really restricted in where we're actually able to go and shoot. So it was a really good time to experiment. And I do think as an end result, we got 4 really good episodes out of it. Also, Series 5 had a big 3-part finale arc, and that was quite integral, and I wanted to make sure we didn't lose a lot of that impact, and I think we managed to do it in a way where it is kind of like a nice setup and segue into the Heart of Time. And some of the stuff that we had to cut does make its way into the Heart of Time, so you will see little bits that we couldn't make happen in Series 5 in the Heart of Time when it comes out at the end of the year. But there's not tons really to say about Series 5. It was really like quite strangely traditional shoot for us. We shot almost in episode order, and we kind of shot almost in scene order. It was quite a weird process, Series 5, but it was good. We got it done. It was a bit longer than we anticipated, but what can you do? You can't, do much when the world comes to a standstill the way it did. But it was fun, and we got it done, and I'm proud of what we managed to achieve from it as well.
A pivotal part of the whole team is Kenny himself. Not only playing so many characters in the series, he is also responsible for sets and props. When it comes to a show all about time and space, the quality of props and sets is key to realising new worlds.
For a lot of aspiring filmmakers, the biggest issue is money, but also technical ability is one thing, is a big issue, especially for me in the props department, because at the time I was just getting into cosplay, so I didn't know a lot of the experience and a lot of the crafts that comes with it, especially with using EVA foam that a lot of cosplayers use for stuff like foam armor and foam weapons. I was originally starting out doing basic stuff using cardboard, duct tape, and any other else, as well as taking anything we can find from party stores, Halloween stores, and anything else we can buy for cheap. But I feel over doing the series, I have been able to use and learn more things, especially using better materials, better skills in terms of crafting, cutting, and even painting. And this has been especially helpful for the various costumes we've had over the years, some of the different props and items that we've used. I've made a lot of stuff over the series, and each one involves a different skill, whether in terms of terms of paint weathering, whether foam crafting, customizing, that sort, and crafting all other stuff. I feel one of the things that has changed the most over I feel one of the things that has changed the most over the course of filming the series has been the TARDIS, in the sense that originally when it first started, it was just a garage with a pool table coated with various different gadgets, buttons and anything else we can find to decorate the console. But then, a few years later, my parents decided to clear out the shed and decided to make it into more of a rec room. And so I brought the idea of decorating it in order to use it for our TARDIS console room. They agreed and we got it from there. We completely... So yeah, my parents agreed to that and we went from there. We had completely renovated the shed, adding in a new floor, new wooden walls, and we painted the whole room white. And once we got to that point, we added yellow circles on to make it similar to the console room of the 80s. As for the console, it was no longer a pool table. It was actually multiple small tables like stacked on together, mainly because they were both circular in order to fit the console room. They were just small like coffee tables, wooden coffee tables that we stacked on top of each other, and then we decided to add on the console accessories. Once I started to learn how to use EVA foam for crafting, I was able to make it more relevant and more fitting of the shape of the console that we're normally used to in Doctor Who. And once the room was all done, once the room was all renovated, we were able to add in some lights. Over the years, we've changed the lights over multiple times over the film in the past few series. Whether it just be LED tap lights just stuck to the wall, to getting like full-on strip lights like attached to the console. The one constant thing that has been present in the console since the beginning was the police siren light, which my parents got from a car boot sale like years ago, and it's just been like in our garage, like gathering dust. So when Chris mentioned the idea of actually building a TARDIS console room for our first attempt at the series, that was seen as a no-brainer, just to use that light as part of the console, especially for the rotor, given how it lights up and flashes to simulate the effect of the rotor. Without a doubt, the biggest issue we've had in making these episodes is finding sets. While we're trying to do our own thing, try to have our own ideas, it's just been hard to find different sets without revolving around the same locations that aren't just each other's houses, aren't just the local area, the local park, or the famous alleyway that's appeared in 99.9999% of the fan films and episodes we've done. As such, having a proper TARDIS set, it helps sell the illusion more on our budget, and the green screen allows us to do more without actually building sets. It's helped a lot, and it's basically loosened the restrictions that we have on our budget. You can definitely tell how over time our ability to make stuff has changed throughout the years. Like, look at Blake's gun from our 50th anniversary special to the gun that he uses now on the Heart of Time. A good example would be the gun that we use in the 50th anniversary special when we introduced Blake. with that prop, without giving away spoilers, does get used again, and it's a much upgraded version. It's much more sleeker, and it's clearly less obvious that it's made of cardboard. At least that's how the first prop was made. It was a toy gun coated in cardboard. This one was a foam prop from the base onwards, and it just looks much more convincing on screen. Much more pliable, much more durable, and generally looks better. One of the biggest challenges I've had making in terms of costume was probably Omega. Maybe because of how much it involves, the sourcing of different stuff, especially the helmet, given the size of all the different components. It's all segmented in different parts, and given the design, I had to use different techniques in order to make it to fit the design of the classic series. While also giving it my own style that would make it look not out of place with the modern series. But yeah, I'm still making props for this series as we go along. In fact, I'm not without saying too much, one of the costumes that we have at the moment is probably one of my favourite things that we ever made. That's all I'm going to say.
Behind the scenes is something that has always fascinated both Chris and Kenny. Seeing how movies and shows were made has always been of a keen interest to the young creators, and as fans of Doctor Who Confidential in the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s, the pair were keen to produce their own version of the iconic behind-the-scenes show. Kenny became the writer, director and producer of DC63 Doctor Who Confidential, a companion series that gives viewers an insight into how they made the fan series possible.
So, making Confidential is tricky, in a sense that you're focused on getting the episode done, but you also want to be filming behind the scenes stuff just so you can have something for Confidential. And even then, when you get the footage, like multiple, almost hours of footage, it can be a bit taxing to decide what goes into the file Confidential, what doesn't, what is relevant, what's important, and just generally what's interesting for it to be shown on screen. What's interesting to show how we interact, what's our creative process on set, and just what isn't, and what's relevant, and just would be interesting for the viewers to watch. Because yes, while we do have our moments where we joke around on set, we make fun of each other, we just generally have general banter, you also want to show what's relevant, how we make stuff, and just try to find a good balance between what's funny and what's relevant and interesting. So we called the behind the scenes specials of our episodes Doctor Who Confidential, basically in homage to the actual Doctor Who Confidential, which was running from Series 1 all the way to Series 6 of the Matt Smith era. And then Chris just pitched me the idea of doing behind the scenes stuff. Just shows how I make stuff, what our creative process is and what we do in order to come up with ideas. He pitched that to me. I had a YouTube channel, I had a YouTube channel, so he asked me to make stuff for that, and I said, okay, yeah, fine, whatever. And since Doctor Who Confidential is no longer stopped running that halfway through the Matt Smith era, we decided to keep the tradition. And since Doctor Who Confidential stopped during the Matt Smith era, we decided to keep this running, even from the start, as a basic homage to the actual Doctor Who Confidential. Because when we started making proper episodes, this is when we started doing Confidential, just to make sure we have a documentation of what we're like and what we were doing whilst we were making the episodes. And to be honest, as long as the fan series is running, Confidential will be continuing to go. We'll definitely film behind the scenes stuff just for funny gags, funny outtakes, and just general behind the scenes bants.
The DC63 Productions team is now run by Chris Jones, Kenny Colliver and Joshua Manley. To properly move toward the future, the team would look to the past and present. The following Zoom meeting was recorded to provide an insight into how the team would come together, pitch ideas and plan for the future. this is the part of the documentary where we are going to just discuss the future of DC63 Productions. So, first of all, I think we should introduce ourselves. By now, you know who I am, Chris, head writer, executive producer, blah, 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 blah. Kenny.
Yes, I'm Kenny, actor, writer, prop maker, among other things.
Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. I am an executive producer of DC63 and currently writing the Mystery Doctor Adventures.
Cool. So this is the core DC63 Productions team. I've got to highlight the fact that me and Josh have both gone for a TARDIS background, and Kenny is just really sticking to that T-Rex. He is not budging on the
We've got dinosaurs, we've got a spaceship, it'll work.
Yeah, it all works out. There's dinosaurs have a part in Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly.
Also it's cool, so fair play.
Yeah, big thank you, girlfriend, for finding the restaurant this is, because this is a dinosaur themed restaurant in Brazil.
That's so cool. Like, why don't we have a dinosaur themed restaurant?
I don't know.
Probably is one somewhere, it's just not publicized.
Well, it kind
I
of
want to find I just want the UK equivalent of Casa Bonita, okay?
This is the thing, like themed restaurants reminds me of like the Rainforest Cafe. And it's like, do people actually still go to the Rainforest Cafe? Is that still a thing? Like, there's one in London.
No, but there's a Forrest Gump themed
I was
restaurant.
going to say, now that you've said that, I don't know.
Right? Like, that seems like a dying thing. Like, and now it's like themed restaurants are themed around experiences. We're going way off topic already. This is to be fair to the people watching this documentary, this is just how we operate. You know, we'll get together.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Intending to talk shop, and then we'll just have like an absolute ramble about nonsense. And then we'll eventually get back round. And that is what we'll do now. So I thought the idea with this would be that we just sort of talk about our individual experiences when we like joined DC63 Productions, and give a little taster of what people can expect from the company in the future. So, I mean, for me, it's a very strange experience, because this documentary is celebrating the 10-year anniversary, which means I've been doing this for 10 years, which is a scary thought, because that makes me feel old. Me and Kenny were in high school when we started it. That's how like old it makes me feel now. Especially being a high school teacher, you kind of go, I was a lot different to what these kids get up to these days. So there's me in Kenny's back garden doing a Doctor Who fan film, and all these kids are out there glued to their mobile phones now. So it's quite a weird experience. What's it like for you, Kenny?
Well, it's just been kind of mad I've actually had the determination to keep it going for so long, but it's definitely been a learning experience all the way through. Like, all the different techniques we've learned going on for it, rising rise, prop wise, and cosplay making. So definitely an experience, yeah.
And I mean, for me, Kenny, it's quite similar. It must be very different for Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of grew up around you guys, like working on it. Would hear the like odd thing about it occasionally and stuff, like saw who was like filming and stuff. But yeah, didn't really get involved until just over 3 years ago now. And the fact that it's even been that long is pretty wild. Because of COVID, I don't think we've only really had the Tales from Time stuff out in that time period. But it's been a blast working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite mad that we didn't like ask you if you felt like joining sooner. It's a weird thing that it took the amount of time they did, but I'm glad it worked out that way, because something that I've talked about a lot in this documentary in previous parts is how we would reach certain points, and all my creative energy and all my
passion for it has gone completely out the window. And if it wasn't for people like Marina joining for series 4 and series 5, and then you joining and giving it like a breath of fresh air, I do not think we would be making this documentary right now, talking about how we've done 10 years. So I'm glad, it's worked out the way it has. I guess everything works for a reason, isn't it? But yeah, so I guess, let's start talking about what they can expect. So it's a weird thing, because we did that behind the scenes thing at the start of lockdown. I think it was like April 2020. And I did my like best Kevin Feige mic drop moment where I just announced a bunch of projects, none of which have happened yet. Because, things take time. That's why I didn't put dates on anything. Because I was like, I know if I put a date on something, it just won't happen on the date that I've said it. But those 4 big projects that we announced. So we'll just sort of start talking in vague generalities. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Josh. About these projects, about kind of where they're at, and what stages of development they're in. So obviously we've got the 2 live action ones with Torchwood, Operation London, and Doctor Who Unchained, and we've got our 2 audio dramas, Doctor Who Exile Years and Doctor Who The Mystery Doctor Adventures. So I think we will go to Kenny first, and we'll start with Torchwood Operation London.
Okay, so to start off, it's a bit of a send-up of the original series in the sense that you have a small team of characters, but instead of Cardiff, it's in London, where basically you have this team that are trying to rebuild Torchwood 1 from scratch with whatever government assistance they can. Still covert, but it's still well known amongst the government. So
cool. So it's kind of like, I think the best way to look at it is kind of a mix between Torchwood and Unit, where it's like Unit a bigger standing in kind of how they operate, and Torchwood is always felt like it's meant to be a little bit more underground, a little bit more kind of like special ops, like people know of them, but to be a part of it, you've got to jump through like a million hoops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah, it's a 4-episode series. I'm writing 3 episodes. Chris is writing 1 of them. And it's going to be in the vein of Russell T Davies here, where the stories walk on their own, but you have small elements that end up building up to the finale, especially with the main villain.
Nice.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's something that is quite good to point out, actually, is we decided quite early on that the live action spin-offs would be 4 episodes a series, and the thought process behind that was when we were doing series 4 and 5, that was originally supposed to be series 4 part 1, series 4 part 2. It was supposed to be an 8-episode series like we've always had, and what we found is, shooting episodes over a longer period of time, shooting less episodes but of a higher quality, gives you kind of a better result. So I really want to get these spin-offs right. And the main show, I'm not going to reveal how many episodes we're going to have in the main show moving forward, but the focus is definitely quality over quantity. So you might not see necessarily, the main show and 2 spin-offs in 1 year. It might be the main show and it might be a pilot for one of the spin-offs. Like the spin-offs might not necessarily be week to week the way that the main show usually is. So we've got a big focus with that. That is where it's really interesting when we get into the audio side of things, because the audio side of things, we've actually got a lot more leeway. So I'm going to pass over to Josh to talk a bit about the Mystery Doctor Adventures.
Yeah, so Mystery Doctor Adventures is a series that follows the Doctor scene in the very first episode of our live action series. But obviously before that episode takes place, given what happens, I don't want to spoil anything really. I mean, is it really spoilers at this point? But yeah, so obviously it takes place with, like, before that first episode, with the Doctor that Kenny played. And yeah, and I believe Kenny is coming back to sort of play the voice. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's the sort of general idea. Is
be a bit weird if he didn't. If he's like,
yeah, exactly.
all right, mate, I'm just gonna bounce on it.
Yeah, the idea is to do sort of like 6 episodes. I think it was 6 a season. Leading to probably, the idea is about, I've got about 4 or 5 seasons mapped out in my head, and a bit on paper as well, not written. Got a couple of episodes written, like the pilot, which Chris and Kenny have seen. The sort of a couple of episodes sort of after that, and then a couple of episodes just later on that I was like, oh, I've got inspired to write this. And this is the benefit of working over a longer time scale, is if there's an episode that I suddenly get a real burst of inspiration for, but I know in the plan it's not going to happen for probably not going to be released for another year or so. I still have time to shift focus and work on the script for that, and then go back to where we currently are. Obviously there comes a point where you can't do that too much, but it's nice to have more flexibility than if this was just a live action one. Certainly the main one, because radio is, there's inherently less sort of directing to do, I feel like. Certainly, like, you lose a dimension. You don't have that dimension of physically directing people. It's all in the voice work, which is its own challenge. And sound effects obviously will be a bigger part, but I really want to use the radio format to do things that in live action we just can't do.
Money runs
radio out. Effective. Sorry?
Where the money runs out and we can't afford to do the big spectacle stuff.
This is it. It's all audio effects.
Yeah.
Which means that anything practical, like putting in aliens and stuff, that goes out the window.
Yeah.
Unless they've like a voice filter or something, we don't have to do anything. We can just be like, oh, this week, this super complicated alien that we've not been able to do in live action is here.
Yeah.
And
I mean, sound effects are just so much easier to deal with, because, like, say you do a Dalek story, you can get Dalek sound effects, you can get, presets to put into Logic to turn your voice into a Dalek, that. Like, it's super common, super easy to come by.
That's it. And it gives me a chance to play about with music a bit as well.
Yeah.
Like, do a little bit of composing or something and see what.
Yeah, definitely.
See what sticks.
That's something I want to get a little bit more into, actually. A little bit.
Yeah, you said about this multiple times, Chris.
Yeah, I bought a MIDI keyboard. I've got to use it. That's the. I've had it like a year now, and it's like I haven't used it really, so I've got to use it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Sticking on the audio front, I suppose I should talk about the XLEs a little bit. I'm very honest and say you probably won't see any of that for a while, because it quite heavily involves me doing the voice, obviously, and I would like to get a bit of separation after my last adventure on screen in the Heart of Time. I'd like to get a bit of separation before I go back and do any of it. But the best way I can describe it is it's basically Obi-Wan Kenobi, but the Doctor. So when Obi-Wan Kenobi is, hiding away on Tatooine after Order 66, it's a similar thing here, except the Doctor's exiling himself. And when people try to find him, he then, is ending up having to do these little side quest mission things. So it's a lot of, reluctantly saving the universe rather than doing it because, that's what he does. So that'll be fun to write, because I'll get to write a kind of different version of my Doctor. And then the other live action show, this one I can actually reveal a fair amount about, because I've thought long and hard about how it's gonna go. It's going to be 2 series at the moment. At the moment, I like the idea of it being 2 series and done. And that is all because the story arc of that universe, because it's essentially a Doctor from an alternate universe who is like more of a brutal killer kind of person. And he changes, over the course of time. But in that universe, because he was banished from Gallifrey, the Time War never happened. But the series arc over the 2 series is going to be all about how the Time War is caused and what happens when the Time War is not just Skaro Gallifrey, but it's also Earth. So there's a 3-way battle war that is going to just like rage on. How that's going to work in live action, we'll find out.
People, to the big bears that listen in the audience, if the term unbound means anything to you, you'll like this.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely taking a page out of the Unbound book. But yeah, so that's exciting. That'll be a really fun one. I've got some surprises in store for that I think people will like. But yeah, so that's those. I think something we should talk about briefly before we kind of, talk about the main show and kind of wrap up this part of the documentary is something that I just completely overlooked, and I feel like it's a really important thing. We should talk about, actually, why we love Doctor Who so much. Because, when you make a fan film, when you create something in that world, you're doing it because you have like a fundamental love and passion for that thing. So I think that's a really interesting thing to kind of just touch on. So I speak way too much. So let's go. Josh, start us off.
Oh man. I'm trying to think where my love of Doctor Who started. I think the first Doctor Who thing I ever watched was probably 2150 AD, but in terms of actual like canon episodes and stuff, would have been the Christmas Invasion. I remember sort of catching a very brief bit of a Dalek, sort of as I like wandered past the living room one night, and sort of being like, "Oh," and Mum and Dad being like, "No, not quite yet." But yeah, it wasn't long before I was like, well invested. Season 3 was when I started watching, like, I've seen every episode like almost as it's come out since then, certainly until getting to uni.
That is a great series, and Martha Jones for the win. Such a good I think she gets over.
So seasons 3 to 5 are just my favorite.
Yeah,
my favorite run. Like end of Russell T Davies, start of Moffat is just.
Moffat starts strong. Series 5 is
He does.
Yeah.
Season 6 as well. I like 6 as well.
I like
and
6
bits of 7.
Yeah, I like 6 more than I used to. I kind of come back round on that. I now dislike 7 more than I used to. Like since doing lots of rewatches, I've gone, oh, this doesn't hold up, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Not to crap on it, but yeah, it's not my favorite. But yeah, that's how I sort of got into it. Mum and Dad were both very much into it. Dad, especially like in the Tennant years, was just absolutely on it. He's, that'll be what'll excite him about the 60th.
Yeah,
and same here, honestly. Like,
it's a great move. Even though it could be seen as a gimmick, I think you got to get that audience back somehow.
I was going to say, let's call it what it is. It is a gimmick. However, it's one that I'm going to very much enjoy.
Yeah, it's an exciting gimmick. Is what it is.
Exactly.
And I trust Rusty Davies to make it not feel like fan service and to make it actually feel like it's got. Yeah.
Well, he managed to do that with Journey's End, like.
Yeah, which is a mad episode.
Yeah.
There's so much going on there. You know, they like blow Daleks up, and there's still like 25 minutes left of the episode. Like, it's crazy. There's so much going on in the episode. Right, Kenny.
So, I think for me, what I love about Doctor Who is not only the characters and the monsters, but also the variety of like different stories you can tell. Because of the whole gimmick of time and space with the ties, you can do any sort of story you want, but it be past, present, future, other universes, other worlds. It's certainly something that allows us to do a lot creatively, especially for a fan series.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's such a like deep lore with Doctor Who that it's just, you know, you've got so many different types of Doctor, you've got so many different companions, so many different monsters, and also something that I think a lot of people, myself included, find appealing about the Doctor is, you know, he doesn't need to go and fight wars, you know, traditionally like with a blaster or like with like some sort of weapon. He just goes in and talks, and he just talks his way through like some of the most dangerous situations, and you know, that's how he wins. You know, uses his brains rather than, you know, his physical ability. Unless you're John Pertwee, then you're like karate chopping everyone.
True.
I love John Pertwee. So I mean, for me, funny enough, I got into Doctor Who the year before it came back in 2005. I started watching episodes on UK TV Gold in 2004. They did so many reruns, but the one I remember, I'm not even sure if this was the first one I saw, if this is just the one that I remember the most. I vividly remember the Five Doctors. The Five Doctors I thought was like the coolest thing ever. And like, it's funny because you watch it now and there's some rough CGI in the Five Doctors, but it plays like a movie, plays like an hour and a half. Just, it's so cool. And it's got the Master, it's got Gallifrey, you know, it's got Five Doctors, which, you know, if you're a Doctor Who fan, you love a multi-Doctor story, just chuck them in there. And yeah, I just remember being like so hooked to the point where when it then came back in 2005, I watched every episode from Rose. I've been watching New Who from the beginning, and I've never missed an episode. Like, even when they've been dreadful, like I've never missed one. I always go, if they don't up the scripts this time around, I'm probably going to stop watching it, and then I watch it anyway, because, you know,
same.
it's like when people say that they don't like, you know, certain films in Star Wars. It's like, yeah, but you're gonna watch them again anyway at some point. Like, I just watched the sequel trilogy again recently, and Rise of Skywalker's a tough watch, but I watched it. So yeah, and I think it's a very similar thing with Doctor Who. You know, like, you know, if you just really love it, you're just gonna keep watching it. And I just remember, you know, before any merchandise came out, I was wearing my black raincoat, pretending it was a black leather jacket like Christopher Eccleston's, and I was running around my garden with a pen, pretending it was a sonic screwdriver. And before that, like, I used to run around the garden pretending to be James Bond. I had like loads of toy guns and stuff, and my mum always hated the toy guns. And then there's me in the garden with a pen. Like, that's 2005, Chris. But yeah,
What my first bit of merch was now.
I think mine was the sonic screwdriver, the like original one that had Eccleston.
Same. The blue one.
Yeah.
For me, it was either.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say it was either the sonic screwdriver or the money box TARDIS, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah, that had the Doctor and Rose on it.
Yes, that one.
Yeah. Mine was
I think mine was the laser screwdriver.
I'm quite late actually, but I remember I got like a lot of the original run of figures as well. Like I had the funny Ninth Doctor that was stuck in that pose, like that running action.
Yeah, And the one with the roads where
what was that?
going...
Yeah, what was that like? And then eventually we got figures that just stood properly, like with a neutral pose. It took them ages to give us a Ninth Doctor in a neutral pose.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, we still get Doctor Who figures that just something about them's just a little off.
Oh, that's because they're all B&M sets now. So they're all like, it's very rare that we get a new sculpt. It's all now just like reuses.
Exactly, they're constantly reusing old parts.
I'm praying that RTD2 gives character options the ability to make new figures again, like properly. Because it'd be a shame not to that like original style run of things.
Look, at the very least, re-release some of the Tennant and Donna figures in new packaging.
Yeah. They did a 14th Doctor. I got that in my room. It came packaged with the regeneration set, and it came packaged with a Jodie Whittaker, but she was wearing all the bits of the costume that she had when she was the Master Doctor.
Yeah.
You see her in briefly for like a minute, and they made a figure of it, and I was like, oh, would have rather the Master, to be honest. But, you know, we're probably never going to get a Sacha Dhawan Master, and we're just going to have to live with it.
Which, given the whole miniaturizing thing, is kind of ironic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm cautious of time because I've got 3 minutes on the camera. So we're going to wrap this up. But before we wrap it up, everyone is going to give one very small bit of information that could be as cryptic as you like about your next project. So like Josh, for example, it's Mystery Doctor Adventures. So you can give us one kind of cryptic bit on that. So who wants to go first? Who's ready to go?
Trying to think of a way to make it cryptic.
Yeah.
All right, I'll start. So for the Heart of Time, I'm gonna go with Heart of Time's hard. I'm going to be as cryptic as saying a word that is in the title of the film. Time. There you go.
Wow.
Right.
What could that possibly have to do with Doctor Who?
Right. And then I'm going to give one cryptic clue for the future beyond the Heart of Time. So, like, you know, what comes after. And that is Rebirth. So that one's a little bit better. I thought about that one in advance. That's why that one's better. Right, who's ready? Silence falls across the land.
I guess to describe Torchwood Operation London, if I could use one word to describe it, it'd be conspiracy.
Oh, nice. I like that. Gives me Winter Soldier vibes.
Yeah, I think I might have told you that tonally it's going to be a bit of a detective vibe. So think of something like True Detective or The Wolf Among Us, but with sci-fi.
Yeah. Cool. Josh?
One word. War.
Nice.
Okay.
Very vague. War could mean a number of things. Cool.
Yeah.
That is the little tease that we are all going to give you. Just very cautious, got 50 seconds. So I am going to go with thank you for everyone that has watched from the beginning to jumping into the middle to jumping in with the newer stuff. Thank you for supporting the channel. It means everything to us, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Here's the future.
The Heart of Time marks the end of a 10-year journey, one that is full of turmoil, but one that has also resulted in an ambitious 37 stories, told over 5 series, 4 specials, and 1 movie. This is the story of not just a group of kids turned adults making a dream come true, but also the story of how any goal is achievable, All you need is a vision and passion. The cloister bell. Temporal spikes right across the whole universe. Well, that can't be good. Right, old girl. Take me to Hamilton. Well, what do we have here?
Doctor, you shall be deleted.
Oh, how original. Oh, don't mind me. The tide's picked up some temporal spikes across the universe, and it just so happens that the source is your cyber conversion.
The universe shall be converted.
Well, now, you see, that's the problem. How'd you plan on doing that with no cyber conversion?
What have you done?
Oh, what, me? I hotwired your motor. She's about to blow. I'd say you have, 30 seconds? See you around, Tin Can.